Hello and welcome to episode 50 of Hitting the Bar, the football podcast. I'm Chris Karle.
And I'm Geoff Saunders.
Well, we've had some European football this week, Geoff, but before we get into all that and some rather strange comings and goings in the world of football, your trivia question.
Okay, this week's question concerns players who have played together for the longest, the highest number of games together. So which two players have played together for the most number of games in their career? And this is in Europe, not just in England. Which two players have played the most games together?
We'll find out at the end of the show. I think the first thing we need to talk about is Juventus. There's been some strange comings and goings there. They won the league, got knocked out of the Champions League and lost in the Cup, didn't they, in Italy? And then after 1 year, sacked Sarri, their manager, and appointed Pirlo, ex-player, of course, bit of a ledge at Juventus. But I think you should talk us why it's funny.
Well, I think it's funny because Pirlo has never managed any team at any level ever. And 9 days ago, he was appointed, 10 days ago now, he was appointed manager of the youth team of Juventus. And he only took his coaching badges a year ago, or started taking his coaching badges 1 year ago. He has absolutely no experience at all whatsoever. It's the most extraordinary thing. I mean, I don't know what they expect.
Yeah, it's very odd that you get appointed under 23 coach. You've just about found out where your office is, and then suddenly you're promoted to one of the biggest jobs in football. Really, Juventus. It's a heck of a team to be suddenly being thrust into the management of. But when he took the under 23 job, he said, "I need time to gain experience. This is perfect for me." And then 9 days later, they drag him out of his new office and move him to the bigger one and say, "No, you're now in charge of the big team."
Yeah, there is a rumour that he phoned up the groundsman, Arteta, at the Wanderers, and Arteta said, "Look, all you need to do is count the cones and water the pitch." So in 9 days, he's counted the cones, he's watered the pitch a couple of times, said, "Yeah, I can do that." And so Agnelli's made him first-team coach. It's extraordinary. It might work, but there is no evidence from history that works. None at all. Everybody's trying to copy teams that have tried to do something similar, and Arteta at the Arsenal and Lampard at Chelsea are examples. But you go back to Guardiola at Barcelona, except that Guardiola had 18 months with the Barcelona second team, who do play in the Spanish second division. So he actually had a year and a half's experience of managing that team, but to have no experience at all of managing anybody ever, not even Sunday League team as far as we know, it's an incredible decision. And I think Sarri is very well. He's unlucky, but Juventus won their 9th Scudetto in a row. But let's go back to the guy who started that run, Conte, who won the Scudetto in 2011, the first time in 9 years that Juventus had won it. So he broke that duck. Then he won it 3 years in a row. Then he was made manager of Italy. Conte is the man responsible. Allegri took over and kept things going, added another 5. Sarri took it on 1 more year, added another one, but they haven't convinced. And from nowhere, Inter got to within 1 point of Juventus this season. Last season they were so far down they're playing in the Europa League, so didn't make a Champions League place, and they now got to within 1 point, and that's Conte, who is a great manager.
Another thing about Juventus is, yes, they kind of petered out towards the end of the season, and maybe it was a combination of that and the Champions League exit that led to Sarri being sacked, because I think they did not win any of their last 7 games in the league. But Sarri did say before the Champions League game that he didn't think that the board would sack him based on if he lost to Lyon. He actually came out and said something like, "Don't be ridiculous, that I don't think the board are that stupid that they would base a decision on 1 game."
So he was actually daring them to do it, basically, wasn't he? So go on, do it now. But I think, to be fair to him, he was just telling the truth. They didn't sack him because of that. That was the last straw, but they weren't convinced about the way Juventus are playing. But they're the ones at fault. They disturbed this very smooth running machine and brought in Ronaldo, who insisted on playing in a certain position, disrupted everything. And in his first season, he scored no more goals than Dybala had the season before. They scored fewer points. They scored fewer goals. They got fewer points. They lost more matches, and they conceded more goals. That was the effect of putting Ronaldo in that team. And it's got no better. So the Juventus Juventus board are reaping what they're sowing, basically. But appointing Pirlo, who's never managed anybody anywhere. Incredible.
Yes, I found it quite ridiculous and very strange. You mentioned Lampard there and Arteta, two former players thrust into the limelight. At least Lampard did a little bit of background work, working at Derby in the Championship for a year. Didn't shine particularly, but he had a good year's experience. And you've said on the podcast a few times, the thing about Lampard is he learns on the job. We know that Lampard actually has a very high IQ and is a very bright man. Arteta, you said about giving advice to Pirlo. I think, looking at both of them, the advice is, make sure you've got incredible skin and nice hair. And look good, because they do both look like kind of catalogue models or something. But that seems to be part of the job, doesn't it? But I just think it's the weirdest thing, and I think they've taken a big risk. Maybe Sarri was right, the board are stupid, because you've got Pochettino out there looking for a job, for example, and you appoint somebody who's had literally 9 days experience as a coach. It beggars belief. This is Juventus, not Macclesfield or something.
Yeah, but what a 9 game. What a 9 days. They must have been incredible sessions.
How many games can his team win, and by how many goals can you win in the under-23s, who actually must be on holiday? So he probably hasn't actually done anything in that job. Not that, he proved himself, obviously that's a joke, but, 9 days in a job where everybody's on holiday, so it must have been just mooching about the office, trying to find where the coffee machine is, and then suddenly you get the big job that I think he was probably hoping to get in 2 or 3 years down the line. Would it have been more prudent of him to say no, or would that mean he'd never get the job? Because I think I would want to gather a bit of experience first.
Yeah, I think that was the thing to do. And you look at the great Italian managers over the years, over the last 40 years, they all started at the bottom, down in the Italian third division, and moved on upwards. Conte is the perfect example. So got a team promoted from third division to the second division, then moved to a lower first division team and improved them to get into the Europa League, and then gets the big job. So he's proven himself. For Pirlo, it wouldn't have hurt him at all to say no. Because let's face it, the job's going to become available in another 2 years anyway, when he's got enough time. So I think it's the wrong decision for him. It could still work out. He's obviously very, very intelligent footballer. You could see from how he played. They say the first couple of yards are in your head, and they were with Pirlo, because nobody ever saw him run. He was peerless. Yes, he played the game in his head. So hopefully they hope this can transfer over to the players. But there is this old saw in football about great players not becoming great managers. Now, Conte, an exception, clearly. Cruyff was an exception. Guardiola was an exception. But that's what they are. They're exception. And there's, Bobby Moore and Bobby Charlton, two greatest players ever to play for England, both dismal failures as managers. And the stories of Bobby Charlton getting his players to try and hit the crossbar from the halfway line, because he could do it, and he did. And instead of building the players up and building their confidence, they just deflated because they couldn't do what their manager could do. So Pirlo is going to have to understand that these players, they're not at his level. He does have some good players. Dybala is fantastic. Lautaro is absolutely brilliant. Dybala is absolutely brilliant, a genius. And they've got to release him. That's the key to it for them. They've got to get him into the game, every game, and play through him. But the rest of them, the transfers in the last 2 years haven't worked. They really haven't worked.
Yeah, I wanted to have a little look at some of those players, because they've got Aaron Ramsey there, who apparently is now 29, apparently not figuring, according to the papers, not figuring in Pirlo's plans. I mean, he's hardly, warmed a seat, and he's already got plans, apparently. But apparently Ramsey isn't one of the players that he's thinking of keeping. Maybe he's worth having a little look at for some Premier League clubs. Maybe we can have a talk about that. But is it an ageing squad? Because I think some of those players, Ronaldo notwithstanding, of course, 35, I think he is now. Players are ageing. You've got Higuain there, some great players. Is it a bit of a rebuilding job he's got on there? Because that's what they said about Lampard. I think it was you or one of our fellow pundits on the radio show we do for 93.6 Global radio station here on the Costa del Sol, said that, he's going to be in the job for a year or two while Chelsea had the transfer ban and then be moved on. Is Pirlo going to be, cast away once Juventus have rebuilt? What's the plan, do you think? think? And have they got to get rid of a load of players?
There is a rebuilding job to do, no question. As to his situation is different to Lampard's. Lampard clearly had a deal where he was going to be there minimum 3 years. So that was that. I don't think anyone was ever going to. It would have had to be a disaster this season for them to get rid of him. And he did extremely well. They're in the Champions League again, which is where the big money is. So fair play to him. He got to a cup final. Okay, didn't win it. All right, fine. Who cares? It was only a cup final after all. Well, nobody cares except the fans there on the day. And this time there weren't any. So it's one of these, who cares? Pirlo, I don't know. If you have a rebuilding job to do, then don't you hire a manager who's good at rebuilding a team and has got some, like what Pochettino, there is a guy who's done it. He can win the show us your medals competition in the dressing room. He's done it as a player. He's done it as a manager. It was a no-risk appointment. Pirlo is all risk, and I hope it works because I admire Pirlo so much. He was a fantastic player. Played football the right way, with his head, with his brain. But oh my God, I think there's an accident waiting to happen there.
Yeah, I think I'm inclined to agree with you. It would be a shame for him to damage his reputation by being completely out of his depth. I do think he's been thrown into the deep end. As you said with the Bobby Charlton example, showing off in front of your players is not going to work. Pirlo, as you said, is peerless, and he was a brilliant thinking footballer, but he's going to come across some big egos in that team. Ronaldo, for example. Are they going to listen to him and respect him? And I think it's going to be a big struggle for him. He's got no management experience. What tactics does he know and understand? I fear for him, actually, and I think it would be a shame if he damaged his reputation doing that. And I think Juventus, it's a bit of a, what do they call it, curved ball there. I think they've made a bit, thinking out of the box is one thing, but ripping the box up and throwing it away is another, and I think they've made a very, very dangerous decision there.
Just to pick up on what you said, it's not necessarily an issue of will the players listen to him or not. His record is such that yes, they will give him the benefit of the doubt for as long as that goes on. But does he know how to play through the press? And well, how can he? He's never done it. How can he set his team up? They were beaten by Lyon because Lyon pressed. They had a very heavy press for the whole of both games, and Juventus are just not used to teams playing against them that way, and they couldn't cope with it, and that's why they didn't win. Has Pirlo got any experience in how you counter the press? How do you play over it? Do you play through it? Well, you saw Bayer Leverkusen yesterday pressing Inter, and they played through the press. They were quite brilliant at doing it. Now Conte is more used to pressing than most, and similarly Inter pressed Bayer Leverkusen, and it was a great game because you could see two managers going head to head and the players doing what the managers wanted. Does Pirlo actually know what to do?
No, I think that's what worries me. I think he'd be maybe a great man manager, and those sort of role model to some of those players, and he is a great name at the club and everything. But when it comes to tactics day during the week, I don't think he'll have very much to offer. You mentioned there about the press and all that on the field. Manchester City in the Champions League, since we last spoke, beat Real Madrid, and the reason was, first of all, they didn't believe themselves inferior to Real Madrid, didn't fear them, but also instead of waiting for Real Madrid to press them and getting them on the counter, they just went at them and pressed them. And Real Madrid people have never done that to them, or very rarely have done that to them, and I think it took them by surprise. I think they were shocked that a team would dare to do that to them, and I think we've seen quite a bit of that this week. You mentioned Lyon there and Inter, and Bayer Leverkusen, all doing the same thing. But another team in Europe who got through to the next round is Manchester United, and I know you've got something to say about that.
Penalty United managed another win, courtesy of a penalty. Who would have thought? Copenhagen denied a clear penalty, or well, no, that's not strictly true. But it was exactly as clear as Penalty United's one that was given. So what a shock. Penalty United go through, courtesy of the referee, into the next round, which is exactly what UEFA wanted. The thing that the fans ought to think about is, why did it take them 105 minutes to score against IFC Copenhagen? Really? And our friend in the radio show, Franklin, has been saying for a long time that Manchester United, which apparently is their real name, which I didn't know, Manchester United are never going to progress whilst they have Ollie at the wheel. And And last night was the perfect example of that. They didn't know how to unlock this Danish league team.
And one of the things that was noticed during the game was one of the substitutions. They were struggling to break down Copenhagen, or is it Copenhagen? They were struggling to break them down, and let's be brutally frank, Copenhagen are not a Premier League team. They're not of that level, really. Now, all right, you can only play the team in front of you, but they were struggling to break them down. Plus, actually, their goalkeeper was absolutely brilliant. Copenhagen's goalkeeper denied United of several clear scoring opportunities, apparently. But one of the things you mentioned, Solskjaer not being up to the job, one of the things that a lot of Man United fans were saying online during the online commentary, was he took, while they were struggling to score a goal, it was still 0-0, he took Fred off, who is an attacking player, and replaced him with a defensive player, and people are going, what? He's regrouping, reforming as a defensive formation when we're 0-0, and it's a take all, win all game, win or lose game. It's only one leg. So does Ollie not? Because he's got the players there. There's some great players on that bench, really, enough to beat Copenhagen. So is it just Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's tactics then that let them down, or was it Pogba?
Well, Pogba had a typical Pogba game. 40% of his passes went forward, and the rest went sideways and backwards. That's not what you pay 90 million for. You pay 90 million for game changers, not the guy like a Noble at West Ham who's just a fetcher and carrier, moves the ball on. You're not expecting him to make the key through balls, and that's what you're paying Pogba for, and he's quite simply is not doing it. 7 goals, 7 assists this season. This season is a typical season for Pogba because over his career it's 7 goals, 7 assists per season. He's never generated the numbers that make him worth 90 million or anything close to it. Which, remember, when he was offered back to Juventus just before this season started, Juventus laughed. And Man United said, "Why are you laughing? We paid you 90 million." And they said, "Yeah, we thought it was hilarious. We couldn't believe you were doing it." He's not worth anything like that. But the change that Ollie made, which did turn the game, was bringing Mata on. Now, I can understand him taking Fred off, who had misplaced a lot of passes, which he does, and replacing him with Matic, who is far more secure. So you say, okay, we have a secure base, we can attack from that. And that actually is what did happen. He brought Mata on, so he had some intelligence there inside forward, who can release the attacking players of Manchester United, who are very dangerous going forward. So that kind of made sense, but it took him till extra time to do it, and he really should have started with Matic. Everybody needs that holding midfield player who's going to protect the back four or back three if they have them, and provide the base for everybody to then attack from. So the question is, why did he not have it at the start? And this is the issue, and this is what Franklin is talking about. There isn't any sense to the tactics.
Yes, I mean he's lucky, unlike some managers with little experience. He's lucky that he's got such a team that he can just put out there and let them do the job, because against Copenhagen, those players should have run riot. I mean, you've got Mason Greenwood, you've got Martial, Rashford, Mata, who I think is a very, very good player, and I think he's a good Man United player, actually. I think he fits in there well. I think he's done a job on many a day for Man United when they possibly should have lost or drawn games. I think he's a hard-working player. I think that he probably doesn't shine and get all the plaudits, but he's a very good player. As to Pogba, though, yeah, it's just, a lot of Man United players were saying he's just a waste of money. Overhitting balls, and as you say, 60% of his passes going sideways or backwards. He's like one of those defensive midfielders who just make sure the other team doesn't get the ball while his attackers find their positions. That's not £80 million worth of anything, is it? I think Pogba is overrated, and I kind of wanted him to do well because I'd seen him do some very good things, but it was like a compilation tape, greatest hits, and really most of the time he's
well, most of the time he hasn't been exactly a flop, but his best period was playing with Pirlo for Juventus, and he'd pop up with goals number 3 and 5 in a 5-0 thrashing, but he'd never score the first goal or the winner. He was always like the icing on the cake. Once Pirlo had won them the game, you saw more of Pogba. He can't be the man who changes the game, and he's never been that. So I think he's a huge waste of money. I don't like penalty United, so I'm glad he's there. You know, and that is the thing that people should take away with. If Geoff's glad he's there, then he must be bad.
It's a bit like, I'd love Arteta to stay at Arsenal because I think probably in the long run won't do them much good. However, I was going to say that Pogba is a luxury, but normally a luxury is something that you enjoy and that is ostentatious, but he doesn't even do any, step-overs and dummies and tricks, and he doesn't actually do anything that's entertaining to watch either. He's a bit of a lumbering player, actually, in many ways. I'm sure he's got it in him. I'm sure he's a talented player. I'm sure he's worth 50 million, possibly, but he's a great disappointment at, what do you call them? Penalty United. Winning by a Bruno Fernandes penalty, who didn't do his funny run-up this time, which obviously fooled the goalkeeper, who did have a good game. Let's stay on Man United because, of course, the Jadon Sancho saga rolls on. On last week's podcast episode, we said that we thought Jadon Sancho was worth, well, you said, and I agreed, Jadon Sancho is worth 3 players. Which he is. He's just brilliant. But there's been some developments in a very protracted and ongoing transfer negotiation between United and Dortmund. Talk us through it, Geoff, because it's really typical United, is it? Or...
Yeah, it is typical, and I think that's the background to it. Michael Zorc, the football director at Dortmund, has looked at the last few transfers that where Manchester United have bought players, and he's seen them say no, they won't pay the asking price, and then faff around for 3 months and then come back and pay the asking price. The thing with Maguire last season, if they'd paid the asking price at the start, they'd have had 3 months working with him, setting up the Manchester United, but they didn't. They pratted him. And Michael Zorc is saying that's what you're doing now. Sancho is staying. He's not going anywhere. Is that a negotiating tactic? Probably. Probably it is, because they're not going to walk away from 110, 120 million if they can get it. But they're quite prepared to say, no, we've got a £120 million player on our books. We're happy to have him. Thanks very much. He's going to give you the same number of goals as Sterling, same number of assists as De Bruyne in one player. That's phenomenal. So his value is probably 160 to 180 million, even in today's market, which is supposedly lower than last season's. But even that is a good price for him, and Manchester United should snap their hand off.
Yeah, I don't understand why they're taking so much time over it. It's just trying to show that they're being frugal or good business people. I don't know, but they could end up with losing him. He could stay at Dortmund or go. And Dortmund, I think, tweeted a picture of him in his kit yesterday. I mean, they're sort of goading Man United a bit. They hold all the cards, don't they? Dortmund, really. They can probably survive without making that money and still have Jadon Sancho. So they hold all the cards, and Man United just need to give them the money, basically. That's it. And get rid of Pogba. Get 20 million back for Pogba towards the Sancho money. Get Sancho's dinner money from selling Pogba. That's what it is. Yeah. You mentioned earlier about Pogba scoring the the luxury goals, the third and the fourth goal in a 5-0 victory or something, or goals that don't count. A lot of people said that about Lukaku when he played in the Premier League, that he scored goals that really didn't make any difference to a game. He wasn't a game-changing goal scorer, but he's having the time of his life now in Italy. He scored again, didn't he, in the Europa League?
Yeah, and on the goal scoring front, he looked very, very good. The other thing he did last night, which was superb, was he played a classic number 9, a Didier Drogba position, made himself available for the outlet ball, held it up, moved it on to midfielders coming through. He had a very good game.
That's the European games. Also, by the way, Wolves got through, didn't they? They could meet Manchester United if they win their next game. Now, I know, Geoff, you're a stickler for statistics. You like statistics. Let's say that you're a person who enjoys facts, because they cannot be denied. So you've got some facts about the whole playing without fans, doing an Arsenal, playing without fans, playing behind closed doors, because we said, didn't we, in a podcast a while ago, that it started off after the lockdown, the restart, with more away victories than home victories, and obviously that is because there were no fans there, blah, 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 but you've got something that kind of along those lines.
Yeah, there was Reading University, who have one of these football research teams, had been looking at the effects of playing without fans at home and with fans, and in research of about nearly 6,500 matches, they've shown that the effect of playing without fans is that the home wins have dropped from 43.4% in the Premier League to 42%. Now that 1.4% is worth a point a season. except of course that it applies to every team. So basically everybody goes up a point, or if that's possible. But yeah, so there is a clear and measurable effect. Now I think it's quite possible that because we started off with more away wins at the start, and it turned around to be that close, the trend is back to normal. But the interesting thing is that every major European league, Spain, Italy, Germany, and the Premier League, all showed the same thing, between 1.4 and 1.8%. And the biggest measurable effect of this was fewer yellow cards for away teams. So referees are not being pressured by the fans, are giving fewer yellow cards to the away team. So, it's there, it's a fact. What it actually means, I don't know, but it is there.
You did say that obviously that statistic affects all teams, so all teams would have that extra point. But that is based on post-lockdown and pre-lockdown. Post-lockdown, some teams did play more away games or less away games than others. That wasn't 5 games away, 5 games at home. So maybe some teams would have actually gained more points than others. Maybe it could have meant the survival of Bournemouth. Maybe it could. So maybe it actually does mean something, depending on who played where and when, I suppose. But interesting that fans do have that is a big influence. 1 point is a lot, actually.
Well, as you said, ask Bournemouth fans, they'll tell you that 1 point is everything. And that goal, which wasn't given by the idiot referee Taylor, has relegated them.
Well, we spoke last week after the FA Cup about Anthony Taylor's dubious refereeing abilities. He was actually refereeing one of the Champions League games this week, I believe. So no controversy that I've read about, but yes, giving away or giving yellow cards, obviously again something that is influenced by the fans. If there is a foul, the home fans are going to be calling for blood or calling for a yellow card. He is more likely to give it, because if it's a foul, it could be nearly a yellow card. So the fans are on his back. Why not just give it?
Yeah, there was an interesting refereeing performance last night in the Inter versus Bayer Leverkusen match. The referee, who was Dutch, which is obviously very bad news for Bayer Leverkusen, because Dutch referees are notoriously biased against German teams. He gave 2 penalties to Inter, which were both overturned by VAR. In both cases, you could see him arguing, and then he had to run to the halfway line and look at the screen and admit that he was wrong. In the first one, which was supposed to be a handball, you could see the Bayer Leverkusen left back. You could see him clearly taking his arm away from the ball. It hit him on the shoulder above the new line where it can't be handball, and he was taking his arm away from it. It was clear as day. But the referee stood there in the middle of the pitch talking to the Bayer Leverkusen players, doing the exact opposite of what the player did. He mimed him moving his arm towards it when he had clearly moved his arm away from it. And the VAR people clearly just said, no, you have got to go to the screen and look at this. And he went and just had to turn around and say, no, it's not. And he'd lined all the players up, made sure their toes weren't going over the edge of the penalty area, so they were encroaching. And he'd made sure Lukaku had placed the ball in the right place on the penalty spot, got them all back, and that this thing was going on in his ear. You've got to go to the halfway line and look at the screen, which he did. The second one, again, he was arguing and then went to look and then overturned it. Not a great performance by the referee, who clearly wanted to give everything possible to Inter. In the end, Inter went through anyway, but Leverkusen look good. They've got good young players coming through, which is what Leverkusen do. Kai Havertz, if he comes to the Premier League, will be a huge addition to it. Brilliant player.
We mentioned there briefly about Real Madrid being beaten by Man City. Barcelona also are, of course, in the Champions League. Since we live in Spain, and we're very grateful for that, lovely, beautiful, fantastic country, but since we live in Spain, we ought to talk about those 2 Spanish clubs, because there are some strange things happening at both clubs, with the managers, with their star players.
Yeah, I mean, Barcelona are in a mess. I mean, throughout the whole of the club, top to bottom, there was a complete shambles. But Messi dragged them through again. Barcelona did not look good, and Piqué at the back again was fantastic. What a brilliant player he is. But Messi won them the game on his own. Like he's done with Argentina, he just dragged them through the match. That goal he scored, he was being being hacked in the penalty area and fouled. He's almost on his knees, dribbling past two people, falling over, and then scoring the goal. It's just one of those moments that only Messi can do. And I don't know if you remember, but one of those Clásicos at the Bernabeu, where he received the ball, he's on the edge of the 6-yard line, received the ball over his shoulder, and in the air, traps the ball in the air on his foot, moved it right and left before it got to the ground, but stuck Pepe on his backside and lashed the ball in. And the Real Madrid faithful at the Bernabeu gave him a standing ovation. It was the most incredible thing anybody's ever seen on a football pitch. Well, this goal the other night was like that. You can't do that. The laws of physics do not allow you to do that. But he did. And he's just dragged them into the next round. City deservedly beat Real Madrid. They outplayed them. And the 4-2 aggregate score doesn't reflect the superiority of Man City. You know, if it had been 8-2, that would have been fair. And it showed the shortcomings of Zidane as a coach. Because he couldn't play through the press. You know, City pressed very, very strongly. He couldn't play through it. He's not used to teams which press them, because in Spain most teams don't. They looked a poor team, Real Madrid, to be honest. So it's a bit hard to say how good Manchester City were. I get the impression, you know, Bayern Munich, who were just brilliant, will beat them if they meet, which they should meet in the semi-final. Real Madrid and Zidane. When it's a case of I'll put my billion euros worth of talent on the pitch and they'll find a way to win, that's fine. But that billion euros worth of talent isn't finding a way to win at the moment. Like Manchester United's billion euro worth of talent, you know, took them to 105th minute to score against Copenhagen, whatever. But it took them 105 minutes to score. €1 billion worth of talent versus 50 million euros worth of talent, and it took them 105 minutes. This is maybe this is a natural consequence of attempting to buy success.
Well, yeah, maybe, absolutely, yeah. Just because the individual players have flair or whatever doesn't mean they're going to be able to play together as a team and beat a team of a lot less talent, but a lot harder working and much more of team players. You mentioned that Zidane. You know, Gareth Bale is coming under a bit of criticism for sitting on his arse and taking the money at Real Madrid, but it's not for want of wanting to play, it's for want of not getting picked by Zidane. He has come under a lot of criticism, Bale, but I said to you, and I'll repeat it here, that Gary Lineker, who I trust Gary Lineker, I think he tweets things when he means them. He said that he also thinks it's unfair that Bale is being criticised for doing nothing and being lazy and deliberately trying to sabotage Zidane and Real Madrid. He said that is not the Gareth that I know. He's a thoroughly nice man. And I tend to believe that, but I don't tend to believe that of Zinedine Zidane.
Yeah, I mean, Zidane made a statement last week which is clearly untrue. What he said was that Bale didn't want to play. Now that is a lie. What Bale did was ask, "Am I going to play?" And Zidane said no. He said, well, in that case, I don't want to travel. Now, we can understand him saying, I don't want to travel if I'm not going to play. I mean, really, what's the point? But then to turn around and say Bale said he didn't want to play, that's a lie. That's not what Bale said. And nobody at Real Madrid has ever turned around and said, oh, Bale isn't training properly. All the players, when asked, say, no, he's a great teammate and he's really putting the effort in and he's really trying. Just Zidane doesn't like him. Well, that's okay. You know, Zidane's a manager. He gets measured on the performance. So fine. If the board's happy with him, then fine. Don't blame Bale for it. It's not Bale's fault.
No, I think it's fair enough. You know, sometimes people don't get on, and sometimes, even if the rest of us can see it, the manager doesn't see or like the way Bale plays, doesn't see a place for him in the team. Fine, move him on, let him go. I think this whole thing about, in that case, if I'm not in the team, I'm not going to play, leave me at home, you would think he would be, you know, under what we're told is going on with coronavirus and everything, you would think he'd be applauded for saying, actually, I'm not going to travel then. Would that not be a sensible thing to do? You know, because we're told we're not allowed to travel apart from essential reasons and all this stuff, and you got a quarantine and everything else. Surely what Bale said was quite a sensible thing in light of those instructions. And also, you know, what's the point? Because all he does is sit in the stand, in an empty stand, looking on at a game that they didn't win anyway. So I just think it's a shame. But Bale is a huge talent who won them 2 Champions Leagues and goodness knows what else. He's a huge talent who's been absolutely wasted. We'd all like to see him at Tottenham or I'd like to see him in the Premier League, even if it was at Manchester United, just so we could watch him on a regular basis, being given the game time he deserves.
No, I think that's absolutely right. You could see him on the left at Manchester City replacing Sarri. But the other player that you could see at Manchester City, of course, who City showed they need is Kane. City's performance against Real Madrid, they created chance after chance after chance, didn't take them. The match was far too close in the end, despite City's dominance, because they didn't convert the chances. If I was Manchester City, I'd be offering 200 million to Tottenham. There you go, turn that down.
Yeah, I think Manchester City, they could probably find that sort of cash down the back of the sofa. That's just about all we've got time for, but before we say our goodbyes, time for the question and the answer to Geoff's trivia question.
Okay, the question was quite a simple one. Which two players have played together the most? Played the most number of games together? And the winner isn't anyone in the Premier League. Steven Gerrard and Jamie Carragher are in 6th place. They played 570 games together. It's a lot, but it's not enough. Sandro Mazzola and Giacinto Facchetti for Inter in Italy played 576 games. Sepp Maier and George Schwarzenberg, Bayern Munich and West Germany, played 578 games. In 3rd place, John Terry and Frank Lampard, Chelsea in England, 581 games. In 2nd place, Sepp Maier and Franz Beckenbauer, Bayern and West Germany, 605 games. But the winners are Sepp Maier and Gerd Müller, Bayern Munich and West Germany, 612 games they played together. It's quite something.
Oh, yes. When you talk about players having an understanding on the pitch, they must have built up quite... they must have been able to pass to each other blindfold by the end of those 600 and whatever it was. How many? 612. That's incredible. What a partnership. That is all we've got time for. We'll be back next week. I'm Chris Karle.
And I'm Geoff Saunders.
And that was Hitting the Bar, the football podcast.